You're welcome back. You are live on the Joy News channel on Multi TV and on Joy 99.7 FM. This is 2017 in review. My guests are Shabima Muslim. She is convener Alliance for Women in Media. She's a campaigner in many respects, advocate in many respects, journalist, editor, host. Shabima, welcome.
That's big post. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to see you.
Us this morning
and
as well.
The man who always sits at this side of the table, Samson Ladi Anyanini, lawyer, journalist. Welcome.
Thank you.
We are expecting editor of Adon News, Ifya Pukia, to join us. Before then, let me start with Shamima.
Let's start with Samson.
Let me start with okay. Let me start with Shamima. Great news here, wouldn't you say?
Well, I should think so. I think that it's been an exciting year, and rightly so, because it was, you know, an election year previously, and we ushered in a new government, so expectations are high. There was excitement, and the story of Nana Akufo-Addo itself was newsworthy enough when he eventually, after such lifelong struggle, I call it the long walk.
And I note the word eventually.
Eventually, yes. The long walk to the Flagstaff House. It hasn't been an easy journey for him. So for us, it was quite an exciting year, expectant of what it was that Nana Akufo-Addo, the president, was promising for the good people of Ghana. And so, therefore, it started with the inauguration, and we haven't seen any down moments.
Samson, did the person Nana Akufo-Addo and his long, steady walk, and I'm quoting Shamima here, to the Flagstaff House, did that play a part in the story that unfolded in the year 2017?
It did, and very greatly. And you'll recall that I had followed him.
Yes, when you were in Kumasi.
I was JoyNews' embed, you know, with him for a couple of, for quite a while. And
in 2008?
Yes, in 2008. I was with him. I went, you know, traveled around with him. And so there was an aspect of his rejoicing that I could personally, as it were, relate to. Because I recall that as we went round, and I've said this before, that some people were making a lot of noise about the fact that the claim that he's an arrogant person. So I remember having to put up a post and say that, okay, look, I have seen this man start his morning with his as it were, the morning jog, or to begin to exercise, have his breakfast, and then after that begin the day, and end the day sometimes about, say, 1 or about 2, 3, and we'll still be
AM
up
the next day.
Yes, we'll still be up early in the morning to go through the drills. And I've seen him interact personally with us and myself. You know, interacting with him. And I said, those who were saying he was arrogant, did they really know him? So when he won, and the manner in which he acknowledged the magnanimity of President Mahama, the concession that President Mahama made, I could relate. You know, I could relate. And even before that, after the election petition and the manner in which he accepted the results, the language that he used, you know, I could relate somehow. And throughout, having watching how he speaks and what he says, because there's one thing you ought to note. I mean, by default, there was a class of law students from LLB and even to the, you know, professional law program, who had to mimic him.
Okay.
Yes, unfortunately, unfortunately, I didn't have to mimic him.
Okay.
I had to read about him and read about the great advocacy that he had.
And you can't go to the law school without reading about him.
And the rest of them. So I have been watching what he says and how he says it. I've been watching to be able to tell myself that this speech was written by himself. Wow. Okay? We know that President Mahama had such a great flair. He knows how to write his own speech, because that is his job. He's a communicator. Yeah. He writes. So he writes speeches and writes very flamboyant, nice speeches that connects with the people. But Nana had an extra thing to it because of his oratory skills. So I've always been looking for the speeches. So from speech one, and I'm sure we'll get there, from speech one, there was a lot of excitement. You could tell that he was in the speech, but then later when you had people coming forward to apologize for certain mistakes that had been done, aspects that had been done, I could ask myself and say, look, don't take this guy serious, because he doesn't know what he's apologizing for. He didn't write a speech. I don't know what he's apologizing for. And you're talking about the communications director at the presidency, Eugene Ahin. Yes, Eugene Ahin. And of course later we got to know a number of people that worked on the speech, but definitely
he took ultimate responsibility.
It was still his speech, the president's speech. So yes, everything about him and the struggle he has gone through, a struggle that I said some of us could relate to because we followed him. And at a certain point, you would realize that I also had to follow Dr. Bawumia through to the north and back and all of that. And I could tell their conversation, and there were times we got deeper, a lot more closer to these people, either directly or through the people that,
that work with them.
That work with them, through Mustafa Hamid, at a point through Yoni Kolendi,
the people
for Dr.
called their
Bawumia.
handlers.
Right. So you could find explanation for the expression of the rejoicing when they won, and the manner in which they exhibited all of that, and the beginning, how they began to handle themselves in managing the affairs of the state. You could clearly connect to how they were where they were coming from.
Something talked about his concession, the campaigns before 2008, 2012, 2016, the concession, and even the inaugural speech. And he says the concession for him did a lot of things for the candidate then. One of the respected lawyers in this town, Chachu Chikata, has said on record that he thinks that concession, and Chachu Chikata was a lawyer for the NDC in the election petition in 2013, and he said that he thinks that concession actually bolstered Nana Addo's standing in the society, in the Ghanaian society. Is that a view you share?
Well, you know that losing an election is really not a very easy thing.
It's not a pleasant experience.
At all, especially that you have wished it long enough. You have actually worked all your life towards it. It's definitely not an easy thing. And when you feel you're that close to victory and you feel that victory was snatched away from you, that's your perception though, that victory was snatched away from you and you felt not well done by, then you seek alternatives, you seek redress in the courts, which is the right thing to do. And then the court declares that, well, you did not win actually. So, I mean, it takes a certain strength of a kind. Not that in our polity it's easy for an alternative to have, emerged. What would have been the alternative? Civil strife, violence, we saw pockets of it and all of that. But the individual himself had couched a certain image of himself as an avowed advocate and Democrat for justice and fairness. He believed in institutions and he expected that institutions should be allowed to work at all time and he should respect the decisions of those institutions. So we didn't expect anything other than that, during the period that he lost that, that was 2012 elections, right? So it was a sweet victory for him, 2016, having gone that. And I think there's a way in which, defeat builds us up, and prepares up for a bigger position. And everybody tells us that experience is the what?
The best
The
teacher.
best teacher, really. It folds you, it builds you, you go through the fire. And it still doesn't even prepare you for the actual work. You would think that having gone through all of that, you come into office and then it's a smooth sailing. Of course, we have seen within the year that things aren't always as easy as they seem.
So
from the
January
other side.
7, he was sworn in and he delivered a speech. Before the allegations or the matters of plagiarism came up, what did you make of his inaugural speech?
I sat in my red couch at the time watching, and I thought it was a powerful speech. I am a sucker for speeches because I think there's a place for speeches. There's a way in which a speech can actually galvanize a society and mobilize energies towards, certain desired outcomes. And of course, we all knew that Nana Addo, as something has said, was an orator, so we didn't expect anything else. But when the words were being strewn together and delivered in the manner in which very engaging, very, very relevant to our times, and I was really very excited for him because, here was a man who had fought a good fight, a long fight, and here he was telling us what kind of Ghana he envisions for himself. Because, it's so easy to fall into the pessimistic image and psyche of the nation because things are not working the way that they're supposed to work. 60 years after independence, we haven't seen the transformation that we expect to see as a nation state, So we've always asked ourselves why. The diagnostics of the problem, everybody knows. So why are we not achieving, what we expect to be? So the speech was beautiful until the rude awakening, unnecessary, because it really could have been well, dealt with.
Because there are those who say that if he attributed those words to the originators of those words, he still wouldn't have taken anything from the speech.
Absolutely nothing at all. And you see, that I recall a case in 2010 when we went to America. I think it was Anas, Amia, myself and I, as well as the Presidential
Africa,
Initiative,
yes.
the YALI, Youth Leadership Institute, that Obama, we were the pioneers. And I actually asked Obama a question, and apparently months later in his interaction with youth from Asia, young leaders from Asia, he made reference to that question because he said something to the effect that, some months earlier, a young lady asked me a question about how committed America was to this new era of partnership with Africa's young, that America was all of a sudden.
So he gave you credit for even that question.
In the speech itself, he just said a young lady. At the end of the speech, the American embassy forwarded that message to me. So when the speech was done and it was being archived, in a footnote, it indicated that the president was referring to Shamima Muslim, a young lady from Ghana who was part of the Young African Leadership Initiative in 2010. So the president may not have to quote, because this is a seminal speech, he may not have to make specific reference to the people he's quoting in the text as he's delivering it, but at the end of the text, the handlers ought to have giving credits there and archived it so reference can be made, because this whole thing could have been cured had there been a reference note, which we are all referred to in the actual document that was submitted to the media. There was a footnote that represented. And
that could have been sufficient defense.
But what is even our preoccupation, Malik, with quoting people from elsewhere? We have indigenous idioms. We have African. So are we saying that an orator like Nana Akufo-Addo or writers in Ghana cannot couch seminal phrases and sentences that express our reality and our aspiration as a people? It's okay. I mean, we've been sold the magazine, we've bought into it. It's so easy. Even you sit in lecture rooms and we are quoting only, what do you call it? European writers and theories and physicists. And I've had opportunity to ask some of our lecturers, so why are there no African writers? Are there not African theorists? who have, you know, that we can actually quote. Because if you say that you want the African to believe in himself, these are the things. So because the European cultural imperialism is so deep-seated, and it's just through these forms. It is through the media, it's through their images, it's through their stories, it's through all the things that we see and aspire to be. And when we continue reinforcing
Pan-Africanist Shamima Muslim, something, a great idea. Something Shamima points out, the manner in which Obama's speech was treated. He made reference to a young lady's question, and they gave her full credit. Do you think we take these things for granted, for which reason that embarrassment, I would say a national embarrassment, happened?
Right.
And poisoned an otherwise great speech?
When I look back to the speech, it is true that one of the immediate things that comes to mind is the aspects that, you know, fell for this, you know, scandal. But
and I wish that my technicians can pull it out so that we can play it.
But the things I take out do not include that. Yes, I recall specific, including even those quotations where he said that we needed to be citizens and not spectators, and the fact that we needed to see what we could do for our communities and galvanize, you know, our energies around and do whatever. I remember he talking about the need to restore integrity in governance. I remember very vividly how he took his time to intone or read out what he was communicating about protecting the public purse, okay? How he spoke about having to as it were, liberalize the spirit of the young Ghanaians who are looking for jobs, and how he spoke about, you know, the innovative, creative juices, you know, of the Ghanaian to allow them to work, and how the business of a government, as far as he was concerned, was to create the rules and to set the pace for the private sector, as it were.
So for you, it was a great, all-round great speech.
I'm telling you that when I look back to that speech, there are things that I remember, and the aspects that took the shine later, allegedly, does not preoccupy me. Well, if you have done beyond undergraduate studies, if you have done research work, you will clearly understand how this was such a big deal. But the manner and the swift manner in which the presidency came in,
and responsibility was taken.
Yes, the swift manner in which the presidency came in to concede and to even give examples of several other, you know, quotations that he made and credited and attributed correctly
in the same speech,
even including scriptures that he read, that he did the attribution. You could say, pardon, this is an oversight, and that's the word they used, oversight. And that, you know, those who were around to get it together.
So Samson, stay on that for me. Apart from this plagiarism story and the inaugural speech generally, for the entire 12 months, beginning from that day, what would you say for you were the big stories that stood out?
Okay. Now, you know, even before December 7, January 7, you would recall that I had cause to write, to criticize. And I had written under the heading, Mr. President, President Akufo-Addo, don't start wrong. That was because I had some expectation, and I felt disappointed. I'll tell
even
you,
during the transitional period?
Yes, even during the transitional period, where I found that he was not keeping to the law. Because this is a man that some may say is synonymous to some law, okay, in the manner in which he has conducted himself over the years. So when I found, for example, that he was repeating mistakes that even Kufuor had made, and got Martin Amidu to sue him in the Supreme Court, except that he was not successful, partly or largely because he had gone to sue the president, and the Constitution does not allow to sue a sitting president. Now, I had faulted him partly, and also faulted...
In what specific case was that?
Yes, I'm referring to it. I had faulted him partly, and faulted the framers of setting laws that we have in this country. That you had a law that said that a president needed to appoint his staffers, and he needed to do that in consultation with the Council of State. Now, those who were making the law, my question was, what were they thinking about? That he needs to start his work at a time when he will not have constituted a Council of State. So how does he start the consultation with the Council of State? And the president began by announcing boldly, the first list, announcing boldly that these were his staffers. I'm sure it was after some criticism that he came later on the 7th of January, to clarify with another release stating that these were in acting positions,
capacities,
pending the consultation that was to be done. He named, for example, a national security minister, where the Securities and Intelligence Law, that I criticized him on that, required him to have done that on the advice of the sort of the board of that, you know, entity,
which had also not been constituted,
which was not in place. He needed to do that on the advice and in consultation again with the Council of State.
Is the problem him or the law, or both?
He discovered later there was a way to proceed without being seen to be violating the law. So you would have heard him now do acting position pending that, acting pending that.
Okay.
So if he had done it from the beginning in that manner, he would not have found himself in
appearing to violate
the law. And I was disappointed because that was my expectation.
He's a stickler to the rules.
That was my expectation, that you do the right. And you pass a law that says that there are certain category of persons that he can appoint as staffers, that he doesn't need to refer to the Council of State. Okay? And I'm like, what's the wisdom in all of that? Then he's supposed to appoint ministers, nominate ministers for appointment.
So you answer that question. What is the wisdom in that?
And even ministers who are supposed to be higher up, he doesn't need consultation with the Council of State. So I asked myself, who put this law together? And what were they thinking in the first place? What were they thinking? We're not a country that builds institutions such that one president is exiting and there will be a Council of State that will still be in a position.
Council of State.
Correct. That will still be in a position to do some job. Or that during the transitional period, he's able to constitute a Council of State. There's no such situation. So why put the president in that situation? Nonetheless, there's a way to go around it. And since he didn't go around it that way from the start, I felt that was such a faulty start for someone who was expected to be such a to pay such fidelity to the law.
The rules.
Yes, to the law. There are a couple of other things that he did around the
so
period.
you list for me what your major stories were,
right,
major headlines.
Right. So,
and then I'll pick
so I'm telling
list.
you my disappointment first.